Well, hi again, everybody, and welcome back to New York Mets 101. This podcast is designed to share with you some of the history of the Mets, how they came into existence, and to throw our 2 cents in where the team is now and where they might be headed. My name's Jim Burns. I'm with Ryan Mucha. I've been a Met fan since 1962 or three. I haven't figured it out yet. And Ryan's been around for a long time following this team and chewing his nails. We've rejoiced when the team won, and we almost get sick when we see them lose. But make no mistake about it, we love the team, and we want you to enjoy this team with us through this podcast. We'll be discussing the current state of the team, the season, maybe their last series, and we'll go on some kind of rant. So enjoy the show, and we'll cover 60 years of Mets baseball. And right now, I'm going to give you Burns's bench. If you're a Mets fan, you read things all over Facebook and Twitter about how this team is falling apart and about those that are looking for heads to roll. You also hear about how Steve Cohen has set the team apart with this enormous payroll. Then again, you hear about something that I found to be alarming, and I'm not even sure if it's true. But if it is, only one head should roll, and that's Rob Manfred. What's being alleged is that Manfred, who hates Steve Cohen, has stacked the deck against our club to assure that the team with the highest payroll doesn't win. Sounds a bit far-fetched, and it certainly looks like we Met fans might be crying in our beer a bit. But humor me. Is it so far-fetched for MLB to create an environment where it's kind of your turn to win? Your turn to win this year and create a favorable schedule and look to put fans in the seats of a team that doesn't even seem to have a real stadium. So it's Tampa's team this year. Just like they allowed Houston to tank for about 5 years in exchange for moving to the American League. Now, that tanking led to the team drafting George Springer, Jose Altuve, Carlos Correa, and Alex Bregman. Now, speaking of Houston, the Mets were swept in Detroit a few weeks ago by a horrible Tigers team. And I'll admit that the Mets stunk it up a bit while they were at bat. But there was one at bat that was taken by a Tiger player that is really interesting. And that's Javier Baez when he batted against Justin Verlander. The first pitch was a foot outside, and Baez hit it over the right field fence. A pitch that could never have been hit, especially by Baez, who swings like a rusty gate, unless he was looking for it. A.J. Hinch is the manager of the Tigers, and this is the same A.J. Hinch who managed Houston to the garbage can banging world championship. I'm not a Manfred fan, and I don't think he does much for baseball, especially not for us fans. He's done more for the owners, unless, of course, your name is Cohen. And Manfred has been trying to change the game since he was appointed, and he's gotten his way on most fronts. The pitch clock, for one. Baseball is based upon innings, not on time. And the minute we place a time limit on at bats and pitches, it won't be long before another change will occur, and that'll be a game clock. I know his next move is using robotic umpires. By the way, Cohen is going to spend his money, and he should. It's his to spend. Truthfully, I don't think he gives a damn what Manfred thinks. And that's your Burns bench for May 15th, 2023. Good morning, Ryan.
Good morning, Jim. I was just thinking how you ended that where it's his money to spend, and I don't think he gives a damn. And it's so nice as Met fans to finally have a front office and an owner that seems to be like that, because for the longest time, we've always been this big market team, and well, at least for most of my lifetime anyway, we've had this front office and ownership that cries poverty and goes, oh, well, we signed this guy, so we can't sign this guy, and always operating as if they're this small market poor team, when the city and the fans like really deserve more than that, you know. So it's refreshing to finally have an owner that agrees.
Yeah, we have an owner that agrees to spend money and he gets condemned by Major League Baseball. Major League Baseball, one of the things that it wants what's good for it. That's what Major League Baseball wants, what's good for it. And I've shared this story before. Right after the strike year of 94, baseball was told to become more friendly with the fans. We wanted more home runs. We wanted, more exciting play. And the steroid era came into being. And during that time period, McGwire broke the home run record. Bonds was hitting home runs. You had guys that never hit home runs, hitting home runs all over the place. And baseball was making money hand over fist, and the fans were coming out to the ballpark to see all these stars. And then all of a sudden, wait a minute, steroids, can't use it, big deal. We're going to crack down. And certain guys became whipping boys. I think that even though I am not a fan of his, Alex Rodriguez became one of the whipping boys, and he made MLB more money than you could ever imagine. So it does what's good for it. And that's something that's somewhat troubling to me, because you got to do what's good for the players, the fans, because those are the ones that are making everybody money. The fans, by paying, by the way, $75 to park your car at Citi Field now, which is kind of high. Okay. And the salaries that these players are commanding at like 25 million, 30 million a year is absolutely obscene. But they're the ones that support the owners. They're the ones that support MLB. And we have to look at them, not it.
Well,
My
yeah, I
thought.
mean, the Major League Baseball really is the owners and the commission, and then the Major League Players Association, that's the players. But they have these different terminology, like they call Manfred the commissioner, and they have all the different owners. But really, the way it operates is kind of like a corporate structure. You have like a CEO, and then you have all your, I don't know if the owners would be board members or shareholders, but the CEO's job is to make sure that you have enough returns quarterly, so that way he keeps his job and he looks like he's doing good for the company, and that's how it's operating. Like it's no strange. We're no strangers to the fact that this is a business, and obviously the people that are involved are making a ton of money. But it seems like the commissioner and the owners these days are probably like more greedy than they used to be. Like it's just gotten very polarized. Like, and there's certain teams that just refuse to spend any money. Then you got a team like the Mets that is spending money hand over fist, and they don't like that because it makes the other owners look bad for not spending money. And then they're making all these changes to the game that I personally have never complained about. I'm pretty sure you've never complained about it. A lot of people that have been watching baseball their whole lives had no issue with this stuff at all. But they have some charts and some studies and blah 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 that makes it think that if we shorten the game a little bit, if we encourage more stolen bases, or if we eliminate the shift, or if we have a pitch clock, that we will make more money by doing it that way. And it's well into its way towards like completely changing the game that we love. And it's the whole idea of putting any kind of time limit in any way into baseball completely changes it. Like that was one of the main things about baseball. There's no clock. It's based on 9 innings. You have 9 sets basically, and that's what a game is. And it might be 2.5 hours, it might be 4.5 hours, but that's how long the game is. And now all of a sudden you got this clock thing, which I mean, I'm getting used to it, I guess. But
Well, yeah, I don't think I'll ever get used to it. Let me ask you a question. How many, and we get the scores, we hear Gary Cohen talking about it and so on. How many extra inning games have you seen this year or heard about? Oh, they won in the 18th inning. Remember those games where everyone's playing? I mean,
ever since they put the Ghost Runner thing in was that 2020 they did that?
Yeah, it was
I
during
don't have the
COVID.
numbers in front of me, but it's completely different as far as the amount of extra inning games, or extra inning games that make it past the 10th inning. Like extra inning games basically doesn't really exist anymore. Now, I don't think they do the Ghost Runner in the postseason though, and there actually was a game between the Mariners and Astros last year in the postseason that went like 17 innings or something.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. It's
Yeah,
there's
but
not
you
many
don't.
anymore.
Well, the point is, you don't see those you don't see
Yeah,
those games. Those are exciting games. You don't. Uh, the concern that I have, truthfully, is a game clock. You know, I want to ask you, who are we? Who, and we're going to get into this. I mean, the two of us were so disgusted that we didn't even chat that much about the games this past week. We were ready to suspend this podcast because we were just so upset about the way things were going, but in fact we didn't. Now, who are we changing this game for? What does it matter? I mean,
like
who cares if it's 3 hours or four? You're going to save an hour and a half, maybe totally. Is what you're saying to me is what Major League Baseball is saying. We want to attract a younger crowd. They're more speed oriented, fast oriented. They don't want to have to sit too long. So we change for them rather than them being able to deal with this game just the way it was meant to be, in a matter of innings, not in a matter of hours. And to me, it makes no sense at all. None.
well, the younger people are the future, right? Those are the people that eventually will be spending more money here. That's their hope anyway. And the younger people, they have so much, so many things taking up their attention, and really they just have shorter attention spans. Like so they like quick, fast-paced, nonstop action stuff. It's not just sports; like you can see it in movies too. Like even the way movies are these days, the things that they pretty much make all the time that seem like they make a lot of money are like these action packed kind of like CGI like comic book movies like that brings in like that gets a lot of money, that gets a lot of viewership, that gets a lot of people tweeting about it, because that's what the younger people, they use social media and they have short attention spans, so they like that kind of stuff. Same thing with baseball, like they like basketball a lot these days because there's a clock. They like football because there's a clock and there's a lot of nonstop action. Baseball is historically, if you're not specifically into baseball, it's kind of boring to watch. I could see that. Like sometimes if I put a game on and if the Mets are not involved in any way or neither of the teams are in our division and they're not, this game means nothing to me, it's kind of boring. It's like hard to watch. I don't care about these players so much. I don't care. I don't know the announcers or anything. The voices seem different. I'm not a fan of just like maybe even the camera guys are different. And I'm like, I don't want to watch this. But if you speed up the game and try to encourage more home runs, which they seem to be doing with these selective games that they use the juice balls, the hope is that the sport will grow because I think there's been a trend over the last generation or so where it's less and less people getting involved with baseball or becoming super fans. Like I know in your generation, because you're around the same age as my father, pretty much every boy in America watched baseball or played baseball. Like baseball was America's pastime. It was a guarantee. Like if you were growing up in America, you probably liked baseball. And it seemed like that it was in my generation too, but I guess these days it's not really like that anymore.
Mm. Well, I know I survived 4 hour games, 3 hour games, and so on, and I still love the game. So they weren't making any provisions for me when I was 12 years old. That the game stayed the way that it stayed. It's this. I think it's this younger, more demanding generation that MLB is probably catering to because they know that they are going to grow up and when they want to make sure that they're coming to the ballpark as adults. So I can see your point. Uh, as I was preparing to do this podcast, I had uh, thoughts about the fact that the New York Mets have won two world championships, two in 60 years. Now, Houston's won two,
Two
I
and
think,
6 years.
2 and 6. The Braves have only won two in many years, and one of them was back in '95, and then they just won one recently. But the Braves are always in that divisional mix where they seem to take the division all the time. And in 1969, the Mets won 100 games and they lost 62 in 69. And that was the first year of divisional play. And the Chicago Cubs, believe it or not, were in the Eastern Division. They didn't have the Central Division back then. It was just the National League East and the National League West. And my father, when I was chatting with him, he says, he says they put the Cubs in this division, and he says we would be in first place for the whole year, but they stuck the Cubs in there, and they ended up really. He said that put the kibosh to us trying to win that division. Well, we won the damn division anyway. We won the division, and we won it. There was a point where it was in August, and we had. I remember the headline in the back of the Daily News because that's what I used to read. And I picked up the Daily News, and I was down. I think I was down the shore because I was from North Jersey. And the back of the Daily News said, the Mets slip is showing. In other words, because they had just lost a bundle of games, they got swept in a doubleheader and so on. And they were only 4 games over 500, and they were 8 games out of first place. And it was the middle of August. They went on to win something like 38 out of 46 games going forward toward the end of the season. They ended up 8 games ahead of the Chicago Cubs in that division when they won it in September of '69. Now, that season, that New York Mets season, they had Gil Hodges as a manager who was phenomenal. And the season started at the end of 1968. And Gil Hodges had a meeting with his players at the end of the season. And he said to them, we've lost something like, I don't know, it was a ridiculous number, like 40 games by 1 run. And in 68, their record was, they didn't lose 100 games. They were like 73 and 89, something like that. He says, we lost 40 games by 1 run. He says, if we could just win half of those games by 1 run, we can win a championship. So the season starts. Our first game in 1969 was against the newly formed Montreal Expos, who is now the Washington Nationals, as everybody knows. And the other team that was formed that year was the San Diego Padres. That was in the National League. And we lose the first game 11-10. Seaver pitched that game as well. We lose 11-10. And I'm thinking to myself, there's a 1-run loss right there. We lost by 1 run. But I cannot tell you in 1969 how many games they won. Their mantra was shut them out and hit 1 out. Shut them out and hit 1 out. And we won games. We won a doubleheader. Both games we won 1-0. Don Cardwell, who was a pitcher for the Mets at the time, drove in the only run in the first game, and Jerry Koosman drove in the only run in the second game. The pitching was incredible, and we kept winning these games. I mean, we could have been down, we'd end up winning 2-1. We're down 3-0, we win 4-3. And I think this is where the Mets have to do better this year. They have to win more one-run games because they lost 3-2 on Saturday because the old adage is you can't win the pennant in April or May, but you could certainly lose it. And when you lose these games by one run, you lose heartbreakers. When you lose, I mean, look at what happened in New York this year, this past weekend. Tampa Bay beat the Yankees 2 games, but the game that they beat them on Sunday was 8-7. You find a way just to get more runs than the opposition, and you got to get on base and you got to bring them around. That's all there is to it. And when we lose by one run, it's a killer. I'd rather lose 10-0 than lose by one run because 10-0 you can mail it in. But when you're fighting for that one run, the game that we lost in Detroit, that Ottavino gave up the go-ahead run, and we ended up losing 6-5 against the Tigers. Killer losses, absolute killer losses. And in '69, we won game after game by one run. It was incredible. So that's one thing that we have to do if we want to improve this ball club.
That was game one of the series too, by the way, and I feel like that set the tone because that game we lost 6-5, and then we just lost 8-1 the next day, 2-0 the next day. Like that. That was kind of that kind of like sent us into tailspin there a little bit.
Well, we went into a tailspin the last 2 games in San Francisco.
San Francisco, yeah. Well, I mean, we didn't like really get blown out. Like we lost those games, but at the time, I didn't think it was going to be so telling. Like, wow, we're in rough shape here. It wasn't until the next series that we got our asses kicked by the Nationals, and then I was
Again.
like, "Oh, something's happening here."
And you see the kid that looks like 12. He beat us in the first game of the doubleheader.
Yeah, he hit a home run the other day.
Yeah, and
he's another guy that came from that trade. He came from the Soto trade.
Absolutely. And you know what? I don't know who, I guess the GM or the owner, they decided to break that team down. They didn't want to end up paying these players, because you had to pay. They weren't gonna sign Scherzer. There's no question. By the way, he looked good yesterday. He looked pretty good yesterday.
He did, yeah.
But I can't understand after they gutted the club why they didn't want to hang on to Trey Turner. That part I just can't understand. I mean, he could have been like there are certain players that you build around, and it was either going to be Soto or Turner, and I don't know why they didn't hang on to one of them.
Well, they're in a rebuild, but they're not like in place to compete this year yet. Probably not next year either. By the time all these young guys that they have that are still very cheap pan out, and then they make the extra little signing or trade here and there, you're probably looking at like 2024, maybe even 25 by the time the Nationals are ready to compete and give it another shot. Trey Turner is going to be in his mid-30s by then. So it was probably a wise decision to let him go. I'm not saying he'll probably still be good at 33 years old or 34 or whatever he'll be, but
he got 10 years, didn't he?
He did, yeah. I think he got 10-300.
Yep. I know he got 300 million, but 10 years, he will be older, but after 5 years, he's not going to be that old, and if those young kids are coming around, I think they gave away a pretty important piece there, but they got some good players for him. There's no question about it.
I don't know all the players involved in those trades, but the 4 that stick out that I think are all going to be good are they got the 2 pitchers. Mackenzie Gore got him from the Padres in the Soto trade, and they also got the shortstop CJ Abrams in that. There's some other guys too, but those are the 2 main ones that came from the Soto deal. And then from the from the Dodgers, they got Josiah Gray and their catcher, Keibert Ruiz. Those 4 guys were all in on top prospect lists, and that's going to be a solid core right there. in
Yeah.
a year or two.
I don't know if you saw the guy that was playing for the Nationals. I think his first name is Stone. I think it's Stone
Stone
Garrett.
Garrett. Yeah.
You know what? And Stone is an absolute perfect name for him. That guy has got a
That guy is
physique.
chiseled. Yeah.
Oh my God, his legs look like tree trunks. He's so just, he got drilled twice yesterday in the same tricep um, in the second game of the doubleheader. But, going back to 69, there was a system that Gil Hodges had in place with this club, and it was a platoon system, and he stuck to it. Like when they picked up Art Shamsky, I think he was with the Reds at the time, who was a left-handed right fielder. I said, well, there goes my boy's playing time, because I was a big Ron Swoboda fan. But Hodges platooned those two, and Swoboda had a great year. Matter of fact, he had the game-winning hit in game 5 of the World Series. Everybody forgets that. And he also made the game-saving catch in game 4 of the World Series. And Shamsky played. Then they ended up picking up Don Clendenin. And I said, well, what about Kranepool? I mean, he's our first platoon. You had Al Weiss and you had Ken Boswell. And then sometimes you'd have, and Bud Harrelson was a switch hitter, so you didn't have to platoon with him. Then they pick up this guy, Ed Charles, from the Kansas City Athletics. They were the Kansas City Athletics at the time. They pick him up, and he platoons with Wayne Garrett. Cleon Jones is in left. He batted .340. He was your guy out there. You had your center fielder. You had guys like Don Hahn, and you had Tommy Agee. And Tommy Agee, you didn't have to platoon with him. He could flat hit against anybody. Then why? And I used to ask the question, why do you need J.C. Martin? They picked up J.C. Martin from Chicago, I believe, because they wanted to platoon Grote. And he had this lefty righty system down so well. And it kind of goes back to that comment that was made about the Tampa Bay Rays, how they just let people do what they're good at. He found things that people were good at, and he had them just do that. You can hit righties, you can hit lefties, you just have to worry about hitting one of them. And I'm telling you, the guy was an absolute genius when it came down. We had a situation, and we were in like the 15th inning against the Giants at Shea Stadium. And Hodges went out, and he put four, and Willie McCovey was up. And Hodges goes out, and he takes Cleon Jones and puts him in a left center field, and takes the shortstop and puts him on the left field line. They had 4 outfielders, and you had 3 guys on the infield. And McCovey hit an absolute rocket right to Jones, standing in left center field, up against the fence. You couldn't have scripted it any better, as if you were making a movie, how this guy managed. And he was smart. And I'm telling you, what's going on with this club right now? That 69 club, they went and they didn't become a 500 ball club until right before Memorial Day weekend. That's when they became a 500 ball club. And that's something that we need right now. We need to get to 500 again, because you can't, and I'm really worried about this week, because you got Tampa coming, who's like hitting home runs all over the place. I don't even know who the guys are.
Have you seen our schedule in June?
Oh,
It's got to be our hardest month of the year. Let me go ahead and pull this up right now. Mets schedule. If we don't get it together this month, then June is gonna break us, and we're gonna be just completely out of it by the All-Star break. All right, let's see. Heading into June, we start off with on June 1st, we're just finishing up a series against the Phillies, and then we have Blue Jays,
Uh,
Braves,
uh,
Pirates, who apparently are pretty good now, Yankees, Cardinals. That'll probably be our easiest series unless they wake up. Astros, Phillies, Brewers, and we finish against the Brewers. That's our
Brewers.
our series right there, or that's our
Brewers is
month.
brutal. The interesting thing, the Pirates, I thought that this was going to be, and it still may be their year, but they've lost something like 12 out of 15 or something. They haven't
Yeah,
won.
it seemed like they kind of had like a lightning in a bottle sort of situation, and they, for the first month it was really exciting because nobody expects anything from the Pirates, especially this year with what was on their roster, and one of their main guys broke his ankle like 2 weeks into the season. But
Yeah,
yeah, I
they're
don't.
short. They're shortstop, right?
Yeah, O'Neill
Yeah,
Cruz.
yeah,
There's a chance like they might still end up with a wild card spot, and who knows, like maybe the Brewers totally fall apart and the Pirates do win that division. But I think that was just an anomaly that month or so where they were playing phenomenal baseball, and I think they're probably going to be more like a 500 team or maybe a little bit above 500.
yeah. I want to just see something here. I think the Pirates won yesterday.
Well, while you are
Yeah,
looking at that, and
yeah. They're 2-8
so
in the last 10 games.
yeah, it sounds like the Mets.
Well,
Um,
well, we're 4-6. Yeah, it's very close.
so to anybody listening, Jim and I talked a little bit about the other day because we've been pretty discouraged with what's going on with the team lately. Although we won two out of our last three, we won a series. We actually won a series, which we haven't done in a while.
No, no, wait a
Uh,
minute. We didn't win this. We're playing today. It's a
oh, we have
wraparound. We're not. We may end up 2-2.
breaking even. Okay, I spoke too soon. Um, but Jim, normally we talk about like let's review the last 5 or 6 games or whatever happened last week. But obviously, lately that hasn't been very exciting. So Jim and I decided, all right, let's break down the two times that we won a World Series. And Jim's going to focus more on the '69 team, and I'd kind of go more on the '86 team. Um, so I've been reading up on them, which obviously, like I know quite a bit about the team. For anybody who's interested, I was born in '89, right? So I'm born a couple years after the Mets won the World Series last, and for the first like decade of my life. Like we weren't really good. We were good the year I was born, but I don't remember that. Um, but I would always hear uh, kind of like this legend, a myth almost of the '86 team. You should have seen the '86 team. I was like, oh, I was born a little bit too late for that. Um, but I've watched the whole series. I watched some of the Astro games too. So I know like the lore of it. I know about the Buckner and all that stuff. The cat on the field. Or is the cat the '69 team?
69. Yeah, that
No,
was.
'86 is the what was it,
Oh,
the guy in the with the he jumped out of the plane, the
yeah,
guy parachute
the
guy.
parachute guy.
Yeah, okay. But anyway, so I'm going through the team, and I don't want to get too excited here, but I see a lot of similarities with what was going on in not only '86, but the couple years right before '86, and to what's going on with the team now. So you have in 1980, you have a change in ownership, right? The Payson family, Joan Payson's already gone for a few years. Her kids finally sell the team, and you get these two new owners, right? I think Doubleday was the main guy. Will Pons were like a minority owner, but Doubleday was probably the main one. Couple years after that, they hire a new GM, right? They get Frank Cashin in there, and shortly after that, they get a new manager, Davey Johnson, in there. Now, from '83 to '85, you have a couple exciting new rookies that come up and kind of build a new core for this team, right? You have Strawberry and Darling, Gooden and Sid Fernandez, Dykstra, McDowell. You also make some trades and signings, and you end up with Gary Carter, Keith Hernandez, uh, Hojo, Tim Tuffle, who we actually traded Billy Bean among a few other guys for. And
Let's
who was
not
the other one we
forget
saw?
Jesse Orosco.
And Ray Knight. Yeah, Jesse Orosco's in here too, right? So in the couple years before, new ownership, new GM, new manager, couple new rookies coming up. And that's kind of what seemed, I'm not saying this is the year that this is our 1986 right now, but we got a new ownership. He's in his third year as owner. We got a GM and a manager. They're both in their second years. We have, in the last year or so, or two, McGill. I'm not saying McGill's going to win a Cy Young or anything, but he's a pretty solid fifth guy, when he's out there. If 1 through 4 are pitching like we need them to, then I'm totally fine with McGill being our fifth guy. We got Beatty, Alvarez, Vientos, and Mauricio right on the horizon. And then we already had a core of still relatively young guys that are going to be on this team moving forward. We got Nimmo, Jeff, we got Lindor, and hopefully we'll have Pete. That remains to be seen, but I feel like I don't think we can afford, not only as a team that wants to compete, but also just as a organization with a fan base. Like, we can't afford to let Pete play somewhere else. We need that guy. I don't think we're going to play better than we are right now. There's no way that we're this bad. We are just in the rut of a lifetime right now. I think I saw something the other day that said we're playing the worst we have since 2012. Like, as far as losing 5 series in a row, we have not done that in 11 years. We're going to snap out of that at some point. I don't think we're going to snap out of it enough to where we end up winning a World Series this year. I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't see that happening. But maybe this could be our 1984, or maybe last year was 84 and this one turns out to be 85. And then next year, with a couple more rookies, maybe we sign some pitching help or an outfielder or something like that. I feel like better times where we're actually, have a chance of winning the World Series, like, I think it's right around the corner. I feel like we have a lot going for us right now that we really have to capitalize on this, because we have that core that I mentioned, but they're not going to be a productive young core forever. Like, McNeil's 30, Nimmo's 30, I believe. Lindor's about to be 30. Pete's like 28. Like, those guys are in their prime right now. We have to strike while the iron's hot. But just as I was reading through the timeline of our acquisitions and all that stuff, I just couldn't help but look at the similarities. I was like, oh, the 86 Mets might be similar to the 2024 Mets, I hope so.
Well, I tell you, I'll just throw this in for you. The guy that we traded to get Jesse Orosco, that was Jerry Koosman. And a lot of people forget that because Orosco was from playing for Minnesota at the time, and that's where Koosman wanted to go back. He wanted to go ice fishing. So he ended up back in Minnesota.
But we had Orosco for a while, right? Didn't he come over in like the early 80s?
Yeah, we had him for a while. He ended up pitching against us in the 88 playoffs.
That guy played forever. He was still playing when I was, 10, 11 years old. Like, that guy played for a really long time.
There's one thing that I like about some of these players. I mean, when you think of Orosco and you think of like Todd Zeile even, or you think of Jerry Blevins, or you think of players that have played for us that, and of course you had Strawberry and Gooden was in there. They played for other teams, but guys that have played for us that always fancy themselves as Mets. They were always a Met. They weren't a Yankee. They weren't a Brave, like when Blevins went and played for the Braves. He always saw himself as a Met. And I
I
kind of
think he
like,
played most of his career in Oakland too, by the way.
yeah. He was the replacement for Chad Bradford. Only thing is Jerry was a lefty, and Chad, I think, was a righty in Oakland. But they always saw themselves as Mets, which I found to be pretty cool. The 86 club and of course I watched almost every game every day. I was watching this club. Was a club that uh, they did play above expectations. Many of them did. Some of those guys had career years. Ray Knight had a career year when
Yeah.
he came over to the Mets. I mean, he won the MVP in the of the World Series.
Where'd
For
he come from? Cincinnati?
Cincinnati. Yep.
Okay.
Because they had a guy named Cincinnati had a guy named Zabo who took over at third base, and Ray Knight was supposed to be the heir apparent to um, who was Pete Rose. Pete Rose at third base. No, Pete
And
Rose.
didn't we didn't even re-sign him after the 86 series, right?
No,
Like
we
tried
didn't.
to give him like a $5,000 raise or something.
We wanted to give him 1 year. He wanted two. He ended up in Baltimore. But he played above his head. We had this guy at shortstop who Rafael Santana, who they used to call him "get him by a step," because he would throw a ball from the shortstop to first base. This thing looked like it was going to sail into the stands. It had such a hump on it. Okay, and he'd get the guy by a half a step. It would not surprise me if they had replay back then that half of the guys were actually safe. You know, and then you had Backman, who was a scrappy guy, but he was not as good as everyone made. They were scrappy. Him and Dykstra were just scrappy ball players. That's what they were, and they were fighters, and they wouldn't care. They were why they were just wild. They'd go out and they'd be partying all the time, doing things all the time. They used to talk about we in between games of a doubleheader, they'd smoke a pack of cigarettes. Hernandez was smoking in the dugout. You had this scrappy bunch who were not afraid to get on the field with you, not afraid to fight with you, nothing. But some of them played above their head. Strawberry didn't play above his head. Wilson, he played up to expectations. We made
Are you talking about in the series or in the season?
The season, for the whole season.
Okay.
They were just a scrappy bunch of ball players who were so confident that there was no way that they weren't going to win. I think the biggest, I shouldn't say the biggest mistake that they made. One of the bigger mistakes that they made was you kind of have like a heart and a soul of a ball club. And they ended up trading probably like their lungs when they got Kevin McReynolds right after the 86 season. They actually, no, they didn't trade. No, wait a minute. They got McReynolds for something. They traded Kevin Mitchell to the Giants.
Won an MVP there.
Yeah, and we got McReynolds from San Diego, and I'm trying to figure out who we traded for him, but I know we traded too much to get him. And when you start getting rid of certain pieces for reasons unknown, like Mitchell wasn't making a lot of money, and they traded him anyway, and to the Giants for what, I don't know. I got to look that up. But that was when you start doing that, you start having trouble. When they didn't want to go for the fourth year with Strawberry wanted 4 years, $20 million. The Mets offered him 3 years, more annual value, 3 years, $16 million. That's what they offered him. He wanted 4 years, $20 million. This is back in the late 80s, and they got rid of him. They got rid of Strawberry. Gooden, we know, had a drug and alcohol problem. We all know that. That's well known. I don't believe he's ever recovered. He pitched for the Yankees, and when Steinbrenner was owner of the Yankees at the time, they still are the owners, but George is now deceased. He took care of those guys. He took care of Strawberry was on that Yankee team that beat us in 2000.
Yeah.
Doc pitched for the Yankees. He pitched a no-hitter while he was on the Yankees.
I think he was on that '96 team that won the World Series too.
That's right. That's right. So,
Yep.
uh,
Oh, wait, Doc was technically on the 2000 team,
what, the Yankees? With the Yankees?
unless this is inaccurate. I mean, Wikipedia has him as a two-time World Series champion, '86, 2000.
Well, that was with the Yankees,
I guess he
86.
was on. Yeah, I don't know if he actually played or did anything, but I guess he won a ring and is listed as the champion that year.
It was well documented after 1986 that Steinbrenner coveted the 86 Mets. He wanted them. So he ended up with Cone. So Cone was actually an 88 Met.
Yeah,
He ended up with Strawberry. He ended up with Doc. He got them on his club. And he wanted those players, and he got those players. And for the position that some of those guys were in at the time, Strawberry and Gooden, it was a good landing spot for them because Steinbrenner really cared about them, and he did take care of them when they needed care. Strawberry had colon cancer when he was with the Yankees, and Steinbrenner took care of him. All there was to it. So the '86 Mets were quite the bunch. Should they have won that damn thing? I'm glad they did, but I think that if you had to do it all over again, there's probably a better club out there than they were. But they were hot stuff.
well, then they had a similar. We were talking earlier about how the commissioner and the owners probably don't like Cohen right now, and the Mets for financial reasons. But back then, the '86 Mets had a similar situation. It wasn't for financial issues, but other teams and owners and the commissioner and just generally like the baseball purists, like they didn't like the '86 Mets. They were like, these guys are young, uncouth, disrespectful, fighters, party animals. Like this should we they were upset that the '86 Mets team won. They were like, this is the face of baseball. Like this is a disgrace, like, and I think that was partly had something to do with like why they disbanded so much afterwards. Like I remember hearing I think I was watching that Once Upon a Time in Queens 4-part, like, 30 for 30 or whatever it was. And like Kevin Mitchell was like, I don't know if there was like just a racism thing because he was black or whatever, but he seemed to get a bad rap as if like he was one of the troublemakers there and they needed to get rid of him. So they got rid of him right after the season. Um, yeah, it's sad. I mean, because I know you don't really hear too much about the '88 or '89 Mets other than that, they didn't win a championship anyway. So you don't hear as much as you do about the '86 team. But we should have been one of those like dynasties for a few years. We should have
Well,
been.
yeah.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, they didn't have the wild card. That's all there was to it. And from like 1983 to '89, we would have been in the playoffs every year. We didn't make it in '83, '84, '85. We won 98 games in '85. We won 90 games in '84. We could have easily won wild cards and been in the playoffs. And back then, the wild card was a little bit different than what it is now. You got to play 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 7 or something. They had this extended playoff format. Um, and then finally, they said, wait a minute, some of these teams, they don't care, if they're wild card or first place, simply because they're going to go to the playoffs anyway and play the same number of games.
Yeah,
So
it's
they
a
changed,
tournament. Anything could happen.
right? So they changed the format of that. But the similarities between the '86 Mets and this team right here, the only differences. You know what I see where baseball changed the most, and you had to stop with the players and everything. When they stopped allowing you to smoke a cigar in the ballpark, that's when things started changing. I know it's supposed to be family oriented and everything else, but I want to tell you, I've been to ball games with my father when I was a kid, and the ballpark was about as much fun as what was going on the field. And they've created, I mean, there was always fights in the stands and different things going on, people running on the field. It was all part of the game. Was it all right? No, it wasn't all right, but it's stuff that went on at a ball game. And so once they change who can come in, and let's keep this whole thing nice and neat and don't allow rappers on the field, and all the other stuff. You got to change the product that's on the field, and they all have to have this persona of grace and honor, if you will. And sometimes it's more fun the other way, even because I mean that's just my thought on it. Of course, I'm old. If you ever
No, I agree with you. I especially when I look at those old videos of the '86 team and you see like fans storming the field. Like, yeah, I'm sure that was very inconvenient for the people that had to clean up the crew, the grounds crew and stuff, for the people that work at the stadium. Or I'm sure it might have even been kind of scary for the players, but nobody got hurt. Nothing bad happened. It was just a bunch of people celebrated and they, ran out onto the field. Stuff like that used to be more tolerable. Like I
yeah,
bet back then, like if anything, might have gotten a ticket for it. Like maybe a couple people that were a little bit too enthusiastic might have gotten thrown in, arrested and thrown in the drunk tank for the night, but that was it. Nowadays, like you do that, like you're probably going to, at the very least, like you're winding up on probation and you're paying like a $10,000 fine or
right,
something.
right. You're a terrorist,
Yeah.
that type of thing. But
Yeah, everything's too serious these days.
so we got a game today. It's going to be at 4 o'clock. Another game at 4 o'clock, and then we got to go home and play Tampa. I predict that the Mets are going to win today, 7-5. What do you think?
7-5. We have Peterson going today.
Yeah. Oh.
I feel
Uh,
like I don't know. I got a good feeling about him because we know he's not a terrible pitcher. There's something going on with him this season. Uh, Maybe it's the pressure of being like, he's never really been a staple in the rotation other than like a little bit here and there when somebody's injured. And then this season starts off and he's in the rotation and then all the heavy hitter, the ace and the number two guy, like they all go down or they're just not performing. A lot of pressure on Peterson and maybe that got to him. I think he might be a little, and we've been losing too, so that doesn't help. I think he's going to be a little bit more relaxed up there today, and I feel like we're going to see a better game out of him today than we have lately. So
mhm.
I don't know about 7-5. Who do they have pitching? I
No,
don't
it's
think it's
funny.
anybody. It's
I'll tell
it's
you in a
not
minute.
it's not Gore and it's not Gray.
No, no, it is Peters. Oh, Corbin, Patrick Corbin.
He sucks,
He's
but
terrible. He's
but
making a lot
he
of money too.
seems to do well versus us. He's a lefty. For some
Peterson's
reason, we have a hard time with lefties.
Peterson's 1-5. He's got a 7.6 ERA. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's about time that comes down a little bit.
I think we should put Carrasco in the bullpen, even though he's a starter. I don't know what his problem was. He had something wrong with him.
He had some elbow issue recently.
I'm surprised that they exercised that option and kept him. What was it, 15 million or something?
I think it was 14, but at the time, he had a pretty good season last year. And yes, he's old, but he's not like so. Some pitchers pitch very well until they're 39, 40 years old. It's not out of the question. And I think he turns 36 this year. So he was a easy, relatively cheap option out there. And at the time, we had a lot of depth in our rotation. So we're like, all right, let's hold on to him too. Like, who knows what ends up happening, but let's keep him. Maybe we trade him at the deadline. And then obviously in the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, that depth that we planned for, it turned into like, we barely had enough to field a rotation. 50% of the people, sometimes more, were not playable, right? Verlander down, Scherzer either hurt or suspended. Senga's been there, but they seem to. There's like some mysterious injury thing with Senga that they never really talk about, but they always allude to like how they have to be careful with him and they give him an extra day rest here and there. I don't know exactly what his problem is, but there's something that they're worried about with his health. Um, Obviously, we've never seen Quintana. Who knows how he's going to be? But yeah, going into in spring training, like McGill and Peterson weren't even supposed to be in the rotation. It was supposed to be Verlander, Scherzer, Quintana, Senga, and Carrasco. And obviously that didn't happen. We haven't seen some of those guys yet.
No, and I am still very upset, even though he did not do well in Atlanta the last weekend of the season, that they got rid of Bassett. That guy was a workhorse. He never was hurt.
He pitched a complete game shutout the other day.
Right, against the Braves, which we would have liked him to have done in September last year, but he didn't. Or
Yeah, he was like the
October.
only guy he didn't do good in that one game where we really needed him to. But he was the only guy that stayed healthy the entire season.
Whole season. Nothing wrong with him. That kid, and then we had we didn't want to give Lugo the opportunity to start, and he's doing pretty well as a starter with San Diego. Those two guys, we should. I can't see getting rid of those guys.
I don't know why we I those are the two I can see just because of Bassett got a considerable amount of money. I think with the amounts that we pay other people, 3 years for 63 million, I think is what Bassett got. Like that's not a terrible deal. Lugo, I guess they just completely underestimated him as a starter. Also, it's probably too early to really say with him because our whole concern with him over the years is his longevity and his ability, his endurance, and that kind of stuff. So yeah, he looks good, but it's also May 15th. I have no idea what he's going to look like a couple months down the road. But the one guy that I did not agree with us letting go was Trevor Williams. Like he was the perfect spot starter slash long relief guy in the bullpen, and he did pretty good. Had a pretty good year. Wasn't seeking a lot of money. I know he wanted a starting job, but I think if he took a starting job with the Nationals, I think for like 1 year, 6 million or something. I think if we gave him 1 year, 8 million, he would have been totally fine in that role that we had him for. Like we should have held on to him.
Well, I don't know. We'll see. Today's another day. We'll see how we do. We'll see what this team looks like. Ryan, do you have anything else? Do you want to do a rant for us, or have you?
Nothing too planned. And I guess because I haven't really been watching the games these last few days, like I said to you earlier, I always know what's going on with the game. I'm never just completely out of the loop. But for the last week or so, I haven't really wanted to put the game on and actually watch it because it's been disappointing to me.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it's frustrating and also honestly, like at times I feel like there's better use of my time than sitting there for 3 hours and watching something that's going to disappoint and anger me.
Yeah, but
Um,
they got the pitch clock. It's only 2.5.
the first couple weeks it did seem like that, but now it seems like it is getting back to like 2:45, 3 hours each game. But because I guess I haven't watched them, I don't really have too much to say about what they've currently been doing, other than we won two out of the last three, which even though one of them we just won by a 1 run, right? Didn't we win one of the games 3-2?
Mm-hmm.
And it's versus the Nationals, who are the last place team, I believe. I still feel good that we at least won two out of three. Like we couldn't even take one from the Tigers, so that's pretty good. This team is going to play better. There's no way that these guys that are on our team, yes, they're old, and yes, they're slumping, but there's no way they are this bad. There's no way that we were this wrong when constructing this roster in the offseason and heading into spring training. There's no way that we were this far off that we have a team that's going to finish, playing like 480 or something. Like this is a good team. They just got to figure some stuff out. And it seems like offensively they are a little bit. I think you know, the influx of like these pitchers that are coming back a little bit, or at least playing better with Scherzer and Verlander. Like those are our two guys that we expect to anchor this rotation. They're supposed to pitch 40% of our games. And I believe that because if they do really well, and also just because they're these future Hall of Fame veteran world champions, like they're leaders in the clubhouse, if they're doing well, they're going to get more out of Senga and
Mm-hmm.
Carrasco and McGill, and it's going to be more inspirational to the other rotation guys. And then also, I believe if our starting pitching isn't putting us in a hole in the first inning or the second inning as often, you're going to see more out of the lineup too. So I think there's a lot to look forward to. I do think things are eventually going to start looking up. Just because we won 2 out of the last 3, I don't know if we're there yet, but it's definitely a good sign. And who knows? Maybe I'll actually put the game on today. Like it's. I don't like to be totally out of the loop. Like I feel like especially if we're going to be doing a podcast and talking about this team weekly, least I could do is watch some of the games. So I'm going to try to watch it today. Hopefully it's not. Hopefully I don't regret that. But maybe we'll be texting a little bit during.
Yeah. Well, that sounds good to me. You've been listening to the New York Mets 101. I'm Jim Burns. That's Ryan Mucha. We're going to be doing a video cast, so that should be fun for everyone to get a load of who they've been listening to for the past 2 months. And Ryan, it's been my pleasure, as always, once again, to speak with you and be with you. And I will see you real soon. Okay.
All right. Yeah. I'll talk to you soon, Jim.
All right, man. Take care.